Hello, and welcome to Cinema Shock, the show that digs deep into the stories behind your favorite cult and genre movies. I'm one of your hosts, Gary Horn. Or am I?
Oh, or maybe you only think you're Gary Horn. If you were Gary Horn, would you know that you were Gary Horn?
I think if I was the Thing, I'd pick someone less fat.
I mean, the Thing picked Wilford Brimley. The Thing is not particularly picky about who they assimilate. I'm Justin Bishop. I'm the other co-host here. I almost forgot to introduce myself. And if I were the Thing, I would pick someone that had more money. And I would pick, who would I pick? If you could pick any person to become, I'd be Ryan Gosling. I mean, if I were the Thing and I got to be somebody, I would be Ryan Gosling.
If you could get to him, yeah, why not?
Everyone loves Ryan Gosling. Well, first you assimilate Eva, what's his wife's name? Mendez?
Eva Mendes, yeah.
That's his wife. So you get to her, but then also you lose the benefit of being married to Eva Mendes. That's true. By assimilating Ryan Gosling. I don't know. You got to be smart. But I guess maybe if John Carpenter ever does a sequel to The Thing, we can think about that. So let's get into it. Over the last two episodes, we've covered the long development history of John Carpenter's The Thing. We've covered the casting, the rehearsals, the Universal Soundstage shoot, and the staggering practical effects work of Rob Bottin, including the dog kennel. We brought it back. See, the dog kennel scene, although that was Stan Winston, which we talked about in the last episode, which presumably you know that because you listened to the last episode. Because if you're listening to part 3 of The Thing, you're going to be really lost because you're jumping right to the middle of the story. Because this week, we're leaving Los Angeles, those Universal Sound Stages. We're leaving those behind. We're headed to the frozen wilderness of Stewart, British Columbia, where the cast nearly drove off a cliff before they even got to the set. That's a fun story you're going to hear. And where John Carpenter was about to discover that it might have been easier just shooting in actual Antarctica. But before we get into it, let's, as we always do, every single episode, we like to shout out everyone who has already joined Cinema Shock Plus. That doesn't mean I'm going to name every person who has joined, but we have named you at some point over the course of this podcast since you joined, because we'd like to give a shout out to everyone as soon as we see a new member pop up. So thank you to everyone who's a member of Cinema Shock Plus. You guys are getting the bonus version of this episode. It's going to have all kinds of extra goodies, further viewing, somebody needs a nap, all that stuff is exclusive to Cinema Shock Plus. You also get the full story of The Thing and how The Thing was made before anyone else, among other benefits, which we'll probably talk about at the end of the show. But for now, just thank you to everyone who's joined. If you want to be a member of Cinema Shock Plus, just head to cinemashock.net/plus, and then you won't have to hear me talk about it as much anymore because we cut this out of those episodes. So in late August of 1981.
Wait, before you get there.
Oh, yes?
Can I say something?
Yeah.
I love you. No.
Oh, thanks.
I didn't know where else to put this, so before we just dive deep into this, I just said 2 things I noticed while I was reading this week that I wanted to bring up that I just thought were just weird side notes. One was that, did you read in the Stewart Cohen blog that one of the issues they had, this is technically a post-production thing, but with Rob Bottin's credit, that they had to deal with the makeup union, that the makeup union warned them that if they used the word effects or created in the credits, that they would get a penalty for doing it. And I think Cohen said we couldn't come up another way besides makeup effects, so we just phrased it how we phrased it in the credits, and Universal had to pay $25,000.
What? Why? What are the logistics of that? Was he not part of the union and you had to be in the union to be able to use specific terms?
I don't think he was very clear. I didn't get it, but I remember him talking about going back and forth with the makeup union.
They couldn't use the word created and they couldn't use the word effects.
Yeah, those were the words he said that they had a problem with.
Why couldn't they say creatures designed and built by Rob Bottin?
I don't know. Maybe they were just being ornery.
Yeah.
Decided to do it anyway. Also, we talked a little bit about that spaceship opening, but I also just happened to remember right across again the story that I think it was also from Stuart Cohen's blog. Check that out, by the way. He said that they were having that meeting, a pitch idea or something, and then the reason they didn't use the normal Universal logo at the beginning of the movie is because they were already doing the spaceship going to Earth, and so they were like, all right, that's too much. That's going to be confusing or weird or something. And he said that one of the execs tried to pitch them on, why don't you have the spaceship crash into the Universal Studios logo?
Brilliant.
Yeah, he said he and John Carpenter were like, is this fucking Abbott and Costello Go to Mars? Is that what they were making?
In another movie, that would have been amazing. honestly. Like, if this were
Right.
a parody or something, if this was fucking like Mars Attacks or something, that would have been great. But maybe not.
But I just
so
can't
much.
imagine this bleak as fuck movie. Like, you want that to be the beginning. Like, you're just like, oh, the kids will love it. Grab some popcorn.
Some Looney Tunes ass opening. Yeah.
In a few minutes, you're going to see some fucking guy's chest open up and eat some arms off.
All right, so in late August of 1981, the shoot moved from the comparative comfort of Hollywood sound stages and onto a brutal location shoot in British Columbia. But before we get there, I do want to backtrack a little bit. I know I've done that a few times throughout these episodes, and that's because the time when things happen. This is how that works. We're moving back to early 1981, so several months earlier. Production designer John Lloyd was tasked with finding a location in the northern hemisphere that could convincingly double for the flat, desolate expanse of Antarctica.
And he found East St. Louis.
No, wrong movie.
That's a callback
That
for
is
everybody.
a callback. That's good. Well done.
Yeah, if you're following along. That's actually the worst city in America.
Yep.
Not just a desolate expanse of Antarctica.
45 years running, actually. East St. Louis. Fuck it. It's on the billboards as you come into the city. Well, Lloyd initially scouted potential sites across Utah, Colorado, and Montana. He actually looked at the Glacier National Park, which is the same location where Howard Hawks had filmed some scenes in his version of this story. But the problem was that long-range weather forecasts all reported that the U.S. was facing a winter with lighter than average snowfall, which forced him to look further north all the way up into Canada.
I'd like to appreciate the wager here that you're putting millions of dollars in a 12-man cast on an entire weather forecast, a long-range weather forecast.
Yeah.
In 1981, like where they're just in fucking blazers flipping a coin. Like your weatherman now can't tell you what's happening on Thursday, but these guys are predicting the future.
They're in like January trying to predict what weather's going to be like in August or so.
Right.
Yeah.
Just seems insane to me.
It does. Well, Lloyd ultimately decided on the town of Stewart, British Columbia, an area that is widely considered the snowfall capital of the world. So I guess at least it was somewhat of a guarantee that it was going to be snowy there. That's just what it does in Stewart, British Columbia. It just snows. But Stewart was a bit of a godsend. Like from a visual standpoint, it looked completely isolated. But in reality, it sat next to an existing, if treacherous, mining road, which granted the production 24/7 access so that they could haul heavy filmmaking equipment, trailers, and crews up the mountain from nearby accommodations. So they had a way to get there.
Now, this was not virgin wilderness, especially for movies, by the way. Stewart already had a film resume, I was reading. 3 years before The Thing, there was a movie by Alistair MacLean called Bear Island with Donald Sutherland, Vanessa Redgrave, and Christopher Lee, and they shot there for weeks. They were using the same roads, hauling a crew to Tide Lake, convoys led by the British Columbia Highway personnel, and they had avalanche teams. This is foreshadowing a little bit because they said that the production of that movie almost makes The Thing look organized, because they said that there was a helicopter that they took up there that got stranded for 4 days and survived by rationing the pilot's lunch.
Wow.
Yeah, and then even after The Thing, I think Iceman was made there in 1984, which is about a frozen prehistoric dude. And then Christopher Nolan brought Pacino and Robin Williams up there
for
Insomnia. Yeah. Anyway, and Disney's 8 Below. That
I was wondering if you were going to mention the Paul Walker classic, 8 Below.
Yeah, that one little tiny town playing Antarctica, Alaska, Norway, and the prehistoric era. It's like constantly portrayed as the end of the world. Nobody's ever shot a romantic comedy in Stewart.
Not yet.
No coming of age summer movies. The travel agents there get like one call and it's like, we need somewhere that looks like God gave up. They're like, okay, we got it right here.
We got you. Well, the goal here was for them to take advantage of the area's heavy snowfall. So in July of 1981, cut to a few months later in the summer, Lloyd and his construction crew traveled up to a barren dirt hill there in Stewart and built the entire fully functional Outpost 31 complex from the ground up. So what you see in the movie is like those aren't models or anything. This is a full-sized complex that they built from scratch. And they did it in the summertime because this way, once the winter snow rolled in a few months later, the facility would naturally be buried by the elements. So rather than relying on artificial studio dressing, they were going to be covered in real snow.
I mean, they did find, like, at one point, like a beautiful glacier, had the perfect amount of snowfall or whatever. But there was one angle you shot at that apparently there was like a really lush forest of trees growing right there. So John Lloyd literally had to design and build like a specific wall of Outpost 31 set to just block the camera from accidentally
from seeing the trees.
Yeah.
I mean, this location, it might not have been as isolated as it looks in the final film, but shooting there in British Columbia, and Stewart specifically, in the middle of winter was still, like, as you can imagine, pretty punishing. I mean, even getting to the filming location became a near fatal adventure for the cast. This story, when I read this, it sounds like something somebody made up. Because it's insane. So when this 12-man cast first traveled to British Columbia, severe winter weather rolled in unexpectedly, and it forced the grounding of all flights. So they get to British Columbia, but they're not all the way to Stewart. So this leaves them without aerial transportation to get to that final destination. So the production had to quickly pivot, and they chartered a commercial passenger bus to transport everyone by land, which required a 6-hour drive through the Canadian wilderness. So while they're pretty deep into this trip, in the middle of the night, the bus was suddenly struck by a blinding winter whiteout storm. And I don't know if you've ever seen a whiteout or been in a whiteout, but it basically means like the snow's blowing everywhere so much, you're surrounded by so much snow that you can't tell up from down, left from right. You do not know where you are. So this happens while they're driving in the middle of the night, in the middle of nowhere. And that caused the driver to lose his bearings on this very treacherous mountain pass. The bus veers drastically off course, slides off of the asphalt before coming to a sudden stop. And the actors look out the window, and they realize that the bus was hanging off of the edge of a cliff. So like, we've seen this in movies before, right? Like where the bus is like the bus is teetering on the edge of the cliff. If you like move one way, it's gonna fall off, so everyone has to move the other way. This is happening in real life to fucking Kurt Russell and Keith David and all of these guys who are on the bus. So while the bus is kind of hanging off the cliff, Kurt Russell kind of like takes command of the situation. Like he becomes the leader that he essentially becomes in the movie. He takes control. He starts ordering everyone not to move. And then he walked them through it one by one, having each actor crawl to the front of the bus on their hands and knees one at a time so that their weight wouldn't shift and knock the bus over the edge of the cliff. And then once everyone was off, the cast actually, they pushed the bus back onto the roads themselves. So these 12 guys like pushed the bus off of the cliff edge and back onto the road so that they could get back to where they were supposed to be.
That's fucking insane. The worst part is that for poor Thomas Waits, he was like smoking pot in the back of the bus and drinking some beer.
Just having a party.
Yeah, and Peter Maloney was like passed out in the back because he'd been like suffering from food poisoning. So these guys don't know what the fuck is happening.
Yeah, what a thing to wake up to. Or I mean, to wake up to if you're Peter Maloney and you're like, where are we at, guys? Oh, we're hanging off of a cliff? Like you'd think you were in a fever dream caused by your food poisoning. Tom Waits is back here just hammered and probably useless when it came time to actually help pull the bus back onto the road.
Right. It feels like this story is, though, structurally McCready's dress rehearsal that was unplanned. So like in that creative screenwriting interview, I remember reading like Carpenter talk about, and I may have mentioned this, but talking about how like Lancaster wrote this crew as an ensemble, but Carpenter had a goal to like in the story, like what he worked with them on was like to help push Kurt Russell out a little more heroically slowly over time to like he takes over and then eventually becomes the hero or whatever. So organically that has happened here, I guess. Yeah. That the bus is about to crash off a cliff and Kurt Russell takes over as the leader and guides these men out. So when it finally happens in the movie, it's like muscle memory.
Yeah.
John Carpenter's like, I'll never rehearse actors again, and then gets like the most effective rehearsal.
I mean, I guess it's just who Kurt Russell is as a person. I guess that's just he's just like that kind of personality. Side note, have I ever told you the story about me almost hitting Kurt Russell with my car?
I feel like I vaguely remember something about this, so this feels like a good time for that story.
It does. Yeah, so this has nothing to do with this movie because this was like, I don't know, maybe like 10 or 12 years ago. Here where we live in upstate of South Carolina, there's a big BMW plant. And BMW sponsors this big charity golf tournament every year called the BMW Celebrity Pro-Am. Like this year, like Bill Murray was there. Like there's all kinds of celebrities that come in for these things and play golf. And the money all goes to charity. And Kurt Russell's done it a couple of years. Well, one year I worked downtown at the time, and I was headed to my job, and this guy jaywalks in front of my car. I have to slam on the brakes.
What a shithead.
What the fuck, man? This guy looks at me, white hair, beard, looks at me. It's motherfucking Kurt Russell. Thinking that I almost hit him with my car when really he was jaywalking. But I would have felt bad because he's one of my favorite actors. So I would have felt really bad. It provided me with a story to tell forever the day that I almost killed Kurt Russell or horribly maimed him.
You almost murdered McCready.
Yeah, but he had like the big white beard like he has in like The Hateful Eight. Like that's what he looked like.
Nice. Yeah.
So it would have probably been around that time, maybe a little before The Hateful Eight, but it was around that time.
I wonder if he would have sued you or how that would have gone.
I don't know.
Speaking of suing, how many Teamsters violations does it violate that they almost threw these guys off a cliff in a bus? And then they pushed the bus back onto the road themselves.
Well, I mean, nobody else was there to do it. Do you think the Screen Actors Guild has some sort of clause in their, what do you call it, their thing?
Bylaws?
Yeah, their bylaws. That's the word I'm looking for. Thank you. I work in retail, man. We don't have unions.
Yeah. I'm just thinking the insurance paperwork on this could have been crazy.
It could have been a mess.
And the worst part is this, as cool of a story as it is, doesn't even make the top 5 most dangerous things about this production. It's like a footnote.
This is foreshadowing.
And then the cast manually rescued a bus from a cliff. Anyway, let's talk about the commute.
Yeah, so after this harrowing event, this exhausted crew finally rolls into Stewart at like 5:30 in the morning, just as the sun was coming up. And who do they see waiting for them as they pull in? Just bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, well-rested, glowing John Carpenter. He smiles, just big grin on his face, starts shaking all their hands. Welcome, guys. Welcome to Stewart. I hope you had a safe trip. Just completely oblivious to the fact that his entire cast had nearly just driven off of a cliff.
You want to know the real reason John Carpenter was so well rested when the cast finally arrived after their near-death experience was because, of course, he wasn't on that damn bus. They cram onto it, sliding around all night long, and Carpenter traveled everywhere by private helicopter on this shoot.
Is that true?
That is true. Yeah.
Wow.
Which is a great way to ensure that your actors genuinely look exhausted and paranoid and frustrated and just full of homicidal rage when you turn the cameras on.
Well, Carpenter had not gotten his pilot's license by this point, right? Because him and Kurt Russell both ended up getting a helicopter pilot's license.
Yeah, they do. And I think we talked about that in Escape from New York, but no, he did not. And the only reason I know he wasn't the one flying it is because there was a story from Stewart Cohen also where he tells a story about them hitting a whiteout one day riding in the private helicopter. And he said, if you want to know what really frightens the Prince of Darkness, John Carpenter, get him in a helicopter and a whiteout.
And a whiteout where... Dude, I mean, that's the scariest, one of the scariest things I could think of. Like, because you can't even tell, other than like gravity, you can't even tell what's up and down. It would be horrifying. But I do sort of recall in the commentary towards the beginning, I guess probably when we see the helicopter at the beginning, Kurt Russell and John Carpenter talking about them going after this to go get their pilot's license. Well, every single day of the 3-week location shoot, the cast and crew had to load into vans. This is the commute you were talking about. They had to load into vans and make a treacherous 45-minute commute. That's 45 minutes one way. Up and then it'd be back down 45 minutes, this steep mountain mining road to reach the little knoll at the top of the mountain where they were going to be filming. Now, for a bunch of cast members who had just nearly driven off a cliff, I feel like they probably had some like PTSD. This is probably pretty anxiety-inducing for them, I have to imagine.
Oh, at least, yeah.
This road was this like narrow 1-lane path, essentially. You can barely call it a road. It's a path carved into the side of the mountain, and it was actively being used by these enormous commercial mining trucks coming down the grade. So the production had to maintain constant radio contact back and forth so that they could coordinate with oncoming trucks to avoid head-on collisions that would just send them off the side of the mountain. So so-and-so's coming up. You've got 2 minutes to get off the fucking road, or this giant construction truck's going to barrel straight into you. Basically, that's what they're doing every single day.
They're like playing high-stakes chicken all the time with these like fully loaded ore trucks going like 30 miles per hour downhill. I remember reading a story from like Larry Franco where he talked about every single, like the panic you would get when you would hear over the radio, like K55 south at 14, which meant that like a heavy dump truck was exactly a mile away. And you had less than a minute or two to find a pull out somewhere to get off of the road.
You're on the side of a mountain, so like you can't just like pull over on the shoulder. You have to find a place that is safe enough to actually pull over. So because not the entire path is going to have places that you can get out of the way.
And they can't stop. So
yeah,
the truck's just coming downhill with all this weight behind it. So they're going to kill you.
On snow.
Right. On snow.
Yeah. So hitting the brakes means they're just sliding instead of rolling.
Right. Well, and even just for a little bit of context, that one lane path, I can't remember if you said this, I think it was called the Grand Duck Mine Road. It was like copper that they hauled, I think was actually the stuff. And it was really, or at least the main time it was active was 64 to 84. And in 1965, the other dangerous thing that happened on this road is an avalanche came down at that time and wiped out the whole Grand Duck mine camp that was set up there. And it killed 26 people.
Damn,
and it was like one of the worst disasters in British Columbia history.
Wow.
Yeah. So this isn't like Hollywood people just being dramatic about a scary road.
No.
Even the locals there are very wary of this whole thing. I think they said the parts of it ran through a tunnel built specifically because the slopes right above it got 40 to 60 feet of snow at a time.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's just like that whole area sounds like a horror movie.
This sounds like a part of the planet that people are not supposed to be living in.
Yeah. It's weird that they're there.
Yeah.
And they even said, I think it was another Larry Franco story or something, but they were talking about it. Was it just scary? It was like always like ominous too, that there was like wildlife up there that also set the mood, especially when you're dealing with a movie about an alien ripping people to shreds. They said like every day on the commute, you'd pass a bunch of bald eagles tearing a dead salmon or some other carcass apart.
Wow.
And actually, now that I'm saying all that too, the other thing with the helicopter is I remember reading that the guy, Richard Weiser, who played the Norwegian guy with the rifle, he had a story about having to fly up there one day and they were going between two cliffs and then hit a whiteout. And so said the pilot just like turned around and was like, everybody shut the fuck up. I have to concentrate right now.
Or we're all going to die.
Because he couldn't see, like he said, it was like this close, narrow passage he had to get through.
Wow. Speaking of, I don't think we mentioned this, but the Norwegian guy at the beginning who is shooting at the dog. I think this was in the Thing Expanded documentary, but they actually translate, like put subtitles for what he's saying when he jumps out and is yelling at him. And he's basically saying, that's not a dog. That's a thing imitating a dog. Get away from it, you idiots. And it's like, if one person had known Norwegian, one single person, all of this could have been avoided.
It's crazy. They like give away the plot right there at the beginning. If you can speak Norwegian, he's telling them that's not a real dog.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Well, so this 45-minute commute, if you listen to any of the cast and crew talk about it, and they talk about it in several of like the behind the scenes documentaries like The Thing Expanded, and they all remember this as being like genuinely terrifying because they're doing this every day. They're doing it before sunrise and back down after dark. So they're not even doing it like when it's the safest time to do it. They're doing it at the most treacherous time to do it with no sunlight. And then once they got back down for the night, they weren't exactly living in the lap of luxury here. Like Stewart, British Columbia is a remote deep water port with very little in the way of hotel accommodations. It's not exactly like a tourist trap, so they don't need a lot of like fancy hotels there. It's certainly not enough accommodations to house a large Hollywood film crew. I mean, that just doesn't exist. So Carpenter did stay in a local hotel as the director of the film. I'm sure like Larry Franco or some of the other like higher up producers may have as well. But even the hotel they stayed in had very little in way of like amenities. It wasn't like a nice hotel, but it was a hotel. The majority of the crew lived in a giant floating dormitory barge that the production docked in the local port. So they sailed this barge in and put dorms on it. And so the crew lived packed into this barge, which was just split into these tiny cramped cubicles, not even rooms really. Like each one of these little cubicles there was just a bed. It was just a place to sleep. So I don't know where they showered and stuff.
The more I hear about it, the more I'm like, man, they are not acting at all. They all really hate each other by this point.
They're all a little on edge. So not only were the conditions difficult for the crew, but shooting in these sub-zero temperatures created a lot of technological issues as well, specifically for the camera department. Because moving a camera from the bitter outdoor cold and into a warm indoor environment, that's going to cause the air humidity to immediately condense and fog up and ruin the internal optics of the camera lenses. So because of that, the crew could not bring these camera rigs into any heated spaces in between setups. They had to stay at a, at least general temperature. So they had to leave the camera sitting in a dedicated camera room, and this camera room was kept below freezing for the duration of the shoot. So the cameras had to stay below freezing at all times for them to work properly.
Well, in which to just put it out there, according to David Clennon in that oral history I was reading, he was saying that it wasn't just the cameras that were in the freezing room. The camera assistants had to stay in there too. And it was because like the lenses would instantly like fog up if they were brought into that warmth, so that they're having to do setups or like prep for the next thing. So they can't move in and out or anything like that either. They've got to just stay out there with the cameras and get everything ready for the next thing. So he says while the rest of the crew would get to go warm up, the camera assistants, their downtime is working in a below freezing room wearing like giant parkas and thick gloves, and they're just staying in it all day.
The glamour of Hollywood.
I know. I'm just picturing these like young camera assistants or something like, I love the magic of cinema, Mr. Carpenter. I'm losing my toes, but I adjusted the aperture. This is how Spielberg does it. Is that right?
Well, they had to winterize the camera gear too, because those low temperatures cause this, there's this like lubricating oil inside the lenses, and those low temperatures would cause that oil to kind of thicken, so it wouldn't work properly. So the crew had to replace the oil with this anti-freezing agent, and then they had to wrap the lenses in homemade heaters. So, and then to make things even harder, the freezing weather drained the batteries in a quarter of their normal lifespan. So the crew had to use what they called battery eliminators. Basically, these like, they sort of rigged these cameras to be able to run directly off AC electrical currents instead of off batteries. The camera department gets a lot of props on this film for one thing, because they're going the extra mile here. And the climate there in Stewart, we've touched on this a little bit. You're going there for the winter weather. You're going there for the snow, you're going there for the visuals that you get from that, but that also comes with a lot of headaches because the climate's wildly unpredictable. You've got the sudden whiteouts, like we've talked about. They also, they'd have heavily overcast skies, raging blizzards, things that were just routinely wreaking havoc on their shoot schedule because it would destroy the visual continuity from one take to the next.
I did read some things like Weiser, the Norwegian guy, again, on the mountain. He was only supposed to be there originally for like a couple of days, but because his establishing shots were filmed in bright sunshine, he was having to wait around for them to get another shot where the sun was back out, and it just never came back. So he was like there the entire duration of the whole location shoot, and it was like the very last day they just finally gave up and they shot his death scene without the sun anyway and somehow like relight it or something. But to reframe it a little bit, I mean, the one cool thing that I did read, like some guys talking about, was that the destroyed continuity of it is kind of a secret weapon in a way, because in Antarctica, continuity doesn't exist very much. Real polar weather just turns on a dime. So it's kind of a lie if everything just looked the same all the time anyway. Yeah. So even mismatched skies and the winds howling and then it's not, that's kind of how Antarctica is, apparently.
Yeah, that's just how it is anyway.
So it's like giving you something production value can't buy. You can't manufacture that in LA with some fans. There's just like a random blast of wind coming through or something like that. It fucks with your schedule, but it's also every day it hands you like a free weird apocalypse to film. So
it was not an easy shoot, to say the least. In order to stay sane and also, just blow off a little steam, the cast and crew would often cross the border into this adjacent town, which is actually in Alaska. One crew member described them as right across the street, which I think is a little bit of an exaggeration, but very close by. This little Alaskan town called Hyder. And there, they would engage in a nightly ritual of intense partying just to stay warm.
Oh, man. Now, before I tell you how they partied in Hyder, let me tell you what Hyder is, because Hyder, Alaska is the population of 100 and it's physically cut off from the rest of Alaska. No road connects to it anywhere that is United States. So the only way in or out by land is through Stewart, through Canada, and it runs on Canadian time, spends Canadian money just as easily as American. They just don't give a shit. They just take whatever. Their school kids go to I guess Stewart is where they actually go to school. So it's a weird place that is America, but not America. But their motto is the friendliest ghost town in Alaska. And law enforcement there is, we'll call it theoretical.
Yeah, non-existent, maybe.
The nearest meaningful authority figures are very far away, and everybody apparently knows it. And so when you're 100-person semi-lawless American outpost, it's just existing out there in the middle of nowhere, and these traumatized Hollywood film guys come in. They decided to initiate them. There's a rite they call getting hiderized. And apparently this challenge is you have to go to the bar and you have to throw back pure grain alcohol, like Everclear, in a single gulp. And you have to turn the glass upside down on the bar, and the bartender lights anything that spills out on fire while you have to chase it with a beer. And if you survive that process, they give you like a little wallet card to prove that you've been hiderized, is the thing.
Wow. I mean, I guess when there's only like a couple dozen people living in the town, you got to find some way to entertain yourself. Because you said the population was like 100, but that was like when this was being filmed in the early 80s. But in the last census, which was in 2020, was the last time we did a U.S. census, there were 48 people in Hyder.
Even worse, yeah.
That's like the size of my graduating class.
That's crazy. And they talk about it in that oral history, how they loved it. Well, that was the way to relieve tension, is go hang out there. But then Donald Moffat, who plays Gary, he is apparently, they were like, he's a family man, so he was just trying to go to sleep every night. And then we'd come barging in at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he would like get up screaming at us, just like, go the fuck to sleep.
Well, they had also, apparently, some of the miners who hung out in that town had never seen a black man before. So when TK Carter shows up, I don't know if Keith David was there, but the story I read, which was from John Carpenter, was that TK Carter, who plays Knowles, he's going there to hang out at the bar, possibly to get hiderized. One of these guys pulled a gun on him. They'd never seen a black man before.
What the hell?
Yeah, so they had to like quickly get him out of the bar and out of harm's way. But overall, they had good things to say about the people of Hyder. They had a good time with them, I guess, once they got over the fact that there were non-white people that existed in the world. Now, there had been a few weeks of downtime between the wrap of that soundstage shoot in Los Angeles and the start of the location shoot in Canada. They had a little bit of a lull between. And Carpenter used that time to head into the edit bay and look at a rough assemblage of all the footage that they had shot so far. Footage that was, still missing most of Rob Bottin's effect sequences, because he's still working on those, and he will be for the next 6 or 8 months. But when John Carpenter saw this footage, what he saw was alarming to him. What he was watching was just, like, in his words, a boring movie about a bunch of guys talking. And I guess if you take out a lot of the Rob Bottin stuff and the music's not there yet and all this stuff, that is kind of what it's going to feel like. But he realized that by watching the rough footage, that by keeping the characters trapped inside the corridors of the base for the entire second act of the movie, just completely killed the narrative momentum.
And I feel like in the creative screenwriting interview, he's a little harder on it than even that version of it, because he says when he was watching the footage, he remembered feeling like this is about to be the dullest picture ever made. And so that's crazy to me. That's his own words about his own footage. And he talks about he's like, maybe I was just a little too in it or something at the time and just not realizing the pacing. It wasn't just like restaging. It was just, he was also talking about subtraction. There were several sections where there was just way too much dialogue.
Yeah.
Certain scenes seemed like they were repeating themselves. And then I love him for this, because he's just like, it was just the way I directed it. Like, he took complete blame for it.
Yeah. I mean, the same thing.
Lancaster script or the actors or anything. He just said, yeah, it's me. So I got to do a little, I think he said, just a little second act work.
Yeah, I mean, the same thing had sort of happened on The Fog, I mean, it was much later in the process after they'd made basically the whole movie. We talked about that a lot during that episode, but at least he's self-aware and can, realize and recognize when things aren't working the way they're supposed to. And luckily, he had a chance to see that, halfway through the shoot in this case. So he hatched a plan to fix these issues. And once the production moved to Canada, Carpenter holed up in his trailer. He started tearing into the script, taking critical dialogue scenes that had already been filmed and restaging them outside in the brutal cold. So they'd originally been filmed inside the base on the sound stages in Universal. He's like, we're going to do the same scene again, but we're going to do it outside in the real cold in Canada. And this included the memorable scene where McCready stands before the other men with a live flare declaring, I know I'm human, but I don't know about any of you. You know, one of like the most memorable scenes from the film. And I think moving this scene outside really does heighten the tension. By having the men kind of lined up in this freezing sub-zero darkness, it amplifies their isolation. Because it makes the very environment, that very environment itself feels like a character that's working against them. It's not just the thing. That's not the only threat to who they are, but the fact that they're in the middle of nowhere with no way to reach the outside world. They're completely isolated. That's just as big of a threat.
It's also why I mentioned like a little second act work, because he says a little second act work in that interview specifically. And I'm like, man, this is more than a little second act work.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, you kind of like redid the whole movie here. They changed everything. Like, and that monologue that McCready gives came late in the game. Lancaster had, I think I talked about this before, but he had written this ensemble piece, but Carpenter wanted Kurt Russell to stand out, and like he had talked about getting him out in front, and this was the monologue scene that firmly established him as a leader who's taking charge of the whole situation.
Yeah, so this is kind of the moment where he becomes sort of the lead of the film, whereas before he had been part of that ensemble. And I feel like, you know, had Kurt Russell not been Kurt Russell, and even, you know, at the time he wasn't like a huge star or anything. I mean, he had been as a child, but as an adult, he wasn't as big as he would become after this. I feel like watching the movie, even if you've never seen it, like you see Kurt Russell there and you kind of know that he's the guy who's probably going to end up being the main character because he's the only one you recognize, really. But imagine in like 1982 when you're watching this, like that's not necessarily the case. You might recognize Kurt Russell. Maybe you saw Escape from New York. Maybe you remember him as like a Disney kid, but maybe not. Maybe he's just another guy in the ensemble. And then all of a sudden during this scene, oh, like this guy's the guy we're following. Like this guy's the one taking charge of the situation.
One thing I just thought of too is like around that same time, just in this scene, not to take away from Kurt, who I love, but David Clinton, you remember I told the story about John Carpenter hearing the guys on the hot mic and like the mutiny thing or whatever. David Clinton, he either remembers a different moment or this happened twice, because he says there was a moment in this scene where he was like, everybody's getting tired and frustrated. We had these boards and we're like putting them up on the door. They got the 2x4s, and it's shortly before McCready, who'd been left for dead by dolls or whatever, forces his way inside, threats to blow up the whole place. Clinton says he was talking shit, saying this would never work. This is bullshit. He was saying, I was saying, like in engineering terms, this ain't gonna work. Any carpenter's apprentice should be able to tell you that doing this with 2x4s ain't gonna secure these doors. He said, and apparently Carpenter had his headphones on for it. And he said all of a sudden, like John Carpenter just like throws a clipboard down or storms across the set to him and starts screaming at him. And it's like, it is not bullshit. And he's like, whoops. He was like, he was really pissed. And he was like, it took me back. He's like, I didn't know he could hear me. He was like, I didn't think I was wrong still, but I was like, all right, well, I'll just try to fake it. Maybe nobody will notice.
I mean, he is a carpenter.
Yeah, I guess that's true. But I'm also sitting here thinking like David Clinton's criticizing the structural integrity of a fake door while wearing a fake parka, a fake research station.
Yeah.
It's just Juilliard. I guess he's committed.
Yeah. Well, so the location shoot began to wind down in like early to mid-December of 1981. I don't know the exact date that it ended, but I know that they were trying to like get done before Christmas. So we're talking like towards the end of December. And Carpenter intended for this whole thing to go out with a bang. You like that? That's because of where we're going.
A sucker for a good pun.
Yes, because if you've seen the thing, then you know that it literally ends with a bang. It ends with the destruction of Outpost 31, and filming that required the total destruction of the Outpost 31 set that John Lloyd's crew had built. They did not use a miniature for this scene. They were going to blow up the actual set that they had built. That meant that special effects coordinator Roy Arbogast, he had just one chance to get it right, because there's not going to be a second take, because there's not going to be anything else to shoot. There's not going to be anything else to blow up. You have one shot. So to capture the blast, Dean Cundy set up 7 cameras around the set, kind of strategically placed so that he could capture the explosion at every possible angle. But these cameras, like we said before, they couldn't just sit out in the freezing temperatures and for hours on end while the stunt was being prepped, because the film stock inside of them could freeze and then it would shatter like glass. You got to figure out a solution. You can't leave them out in the cold, because it's going to take a while to set up an explosion of this size. So here's where this story, yet another insane story from the behind the scenes on this film. Because these cameras held like 2.5 minutes of film. So you couldn't just leave them rolling. You couldn't like turn them on and let them roll until it was time to make the thing blow up. And since they didn't have a remote trigger for the cameras, the camera assistant had to stand right next to a set that was loaded with napalm, dynamite, and thermite. Then when the cue was given, they manually flipped the camera on and then had to sprint 50 yards down the hill in the dark, mind you. And once they radioed that they were safely behind a snowbank that was big enough to protect them from the blast, Arbogast triggered the detonator, unleashing a series of enormous fireballs that instantly vaporized the outpost.
And according to, which is wild to think about, but according to Larry Franco, it wasn't even quite instant, quote unquote. It was more like a Looney Tunes moment in a lot of ways, because he said after the sequence of bombs went off, he said him and some other of the crew were safely behind like a bulldozer blade nearby. He said that they were like waiting and ducked behind it. He had his radio and they're waiting for cut after all the bombs go off. And he said he was waiting and waiting. And finally, he says he like picks up the radio and he's, hey, what's going on? And he said it finally, he was like, do we move? Finally, like Carpenter comes over the radio and is like, cut. And so they're like, all right. So they come out and they start cheering. And all of a sudden, a bomb goes off. It was far enough away, he said, but it was close enough that they all were like screaming and diving face first into
duck and cover. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was like a bomb that's what they were waiting for. It was like delayed. They were like, where's that other one?
Yeah.
Pretty sure there's still one more. And then he was like, and nobody got it on film because he said cut. And so all the cameras were off.
Wow. I mean, I don't know a ton about like Roy Arbogast, who was the special effects coordinator on this. I know that he was nominated for an Academy Award for, he worked on Close Encounters of the Third Kind with Steven Spielberg, but I don't know much about him otherwise. Like, I don't know his autobiography or his background or anything like that. But it seems like there are a couple of other stories on this that when I read them, I'm like, this makes me question, like, his abilities sometimes, because his job is to make shit blow up, basically. I mean, among other things, special effects coordinators do a lot of things, but that is obviously on this movie a big one. You know, this big one that we see here, this is the last explosion in the film, but there are several others in the final act of the film, although a lot of the other ones had been filmed back in the confines of the Universal sound stages months before this. And one of those explosions that was filmed on the Universal lot didn't go quite as planned. So during the filming of the blood test sequence, at the end, Palmer turns into the thing, bursts through the wall into the snow, and after being shot with the flamethrower, jumps in the snow. Then McDudely, he tosses out a stick of dynamite to kind of finish him off. Well, for this shot, Arbogast buried an explosive charge in the snow. It was beneath a dummy of the Palmer monster. So Kurt Russell was told to toss his prop dynamite, at which point Arbogast would trigger what was supposed to be a, quote, small explosion. And instead, the charge was huge, and it threw shockwaves and fiery debris all over the crew. And Kurt Russell was standing dangerously close to the blast. It was kind of, as you can imagine, not very happy with that.
They are determined to kill themselves in this movie. Is what's going on. And I feel like I'm with you on Arbogast. Like, I feel like effects coordinators have like a different dictionary than the rest of us. To them, small means like probably survivable, I guess. But it wasn't just that it was dangerously close. Like Kurt Russell, I think it's in the commentary, talks about like he legitimately thought he was going to die. Like, he said the look of sheer terror on McCready's face when that blast goes off is not acting. He said that it was so massive that his exact quote I had written down was, I felt stuff go through me on that. I was just lucky.
Yeah, I wish that the audio of it existed. I tried to find it, but there was a magazine article. I want to say it was Starlog. It might have been Cinefantastique, where they were on set during this. Like, they were on set during the filming of this, and they had recorded, they were recording audio because they were, doing a story and whatnot. So they had recorded audio of this scene, but for some legal reason, they weren't allowed to release it, like a copyright thing or whatever. But there's a transcript of it out there. It might be in the magazine. I think it's also on the Outpost 31 website, where it's during this incident. And like one crew member's like, holy shit, did you fucking see that? This thing just flew, a piece of something just flew right past my head. And Kurt Russell's like, holy shit. My favorite quote from Kurt Russell during that where they're like, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Cowa fucking bunga." And I could just hear Kurt Russell in his like Kurt Russell voice yelling. Like at first he's like freaked out, then he gets like a burst of adrenaline over what just happened. Right. It just says "Cowa fucking bunga." Oh my and God. Now I want like a T-shirt with Kurt Russell on it that says "Cowa fucking bunga." That I would have to explain to every single person that saw it. But
worth it.
Good story.
I mean, I'm thinking like bus off a cliff, oversized detonations, -30 during the commutes. Like when we think back to earlier and John Carpenter talking about Kurt Russell, because he'll hit his marks and he won't complain. And it's like in 1981, he is personally stress testing that warranty on that relationship.
Imagine if this had been Kevin Kline.
Right.
Listen,
Kurt's a good actor, but yeah. No, I'm with you. Like, he's like trying to like Shakespeare it up over here.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Kurt's a great actor, but his greatest performance ever might be pretending that he was not thinking about suing John Carpenter at some point. I wanted to mention too before we get further, because I kept forgetting to mention it earlier. We've hit on the blood test scene a few times, but one of the things that always blew my mind growing up, and even now still, that I had to look, was the blood test scene. Mm-hmm. And I don't know where else we're going to put it, so I'm just going to say it now. But the way that like when they burn it, like the blood physically like recoils and runs away from the hot wire. Like, I was just like, what the fuck? And that was apparently Dean motherfucking Cundy. That son of a bitch. Like, they didn't use like magnets or animation. They built like a custom section of the floor on a gimbal, and then they bolted the camera directly on the floor so that it stayed perfectly stationary. And then they physically just like tilted the whole room, making the blood like slide across the frame, basically. Wow. It was just a weird fucking rotation thing that they did.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty lo-fi solution to that problem. It's that's clever. But it was Dean Cundy's idea?
That's what I read. It was a stroke of genius by Dean Cundy is what I had written here. I had that from somewhere, and I wish I could should have written down where, but that's pretty crazy because I don't know, that whole Palmer scene, like, I mean, the Palmer thing, I read that originally Carpenter and Cohen and Franco and everybody, they wanted a massive like centrifuge set, just like Stanley Kubrick used in 2001, so that the stuntman could like literally spread up the wall and across the ceiling. But they couldn't afford like it was going to take a big set and then like a 20-man crew to operate it or something like that. So they were like, that's out of here. So they found another cheap workaround, which was they turned the camera upside down and put Dick Warlock in a rubber mask and the gloves or whatever, and just had him fall off of a platform onto a mattress that was covered with balsa wood. And so that's how they got that effect of him going into the ceiling, basically.
Wow. That's fun. So since you mentioned that, Gary, I want to mention something that I didn't really know where to put in my notes either, because it's kind of a one-off story during the making of this. So at the end of the movie, one thing that always struck me was there's this very, very brief moment where we see these tentacles pop up out of the floor. It's like when they're going after the Blair monster at the end. These tentacle-looking things kind of come up out of the floor, and it's very clearly stop-motion animation. You know the moment I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Well, it stands out because it's the only moment in the entire movie that uses stop-motion animation. Well, that wasn't originally the case. Originally, the Blair thing was supposed to feature extensive stop-motion animation. There's this animator named Randy Cook who was going to work on it. Like, they were going to have this shot. They had planned this shot where this dog creature burst out of the Blair monster's abdomen to attack McCready. And it was all going to be done in stop motion. And Randy Cook and his team spent months on this sequence. They had this stop-motion puppet. It was like 10 inches tall. They worked on it for, like, the first shot took them like 12 hours. I mean, if you know anything about stop motion animation, you know that it's an incredibly time consuming process. And they also had to build a miniature set that matched the real set, which was the real set was in Universal. But the problem was the moment where the monster crushes the detonator. because of the size of because they had built a little miniature detonator, and there was no way to get it to crush it that where it didn't look like a miniature. Basically, there's no way for them to convincingly do it. And then ultimately, John Carpenter just decided to cut all of it out. Like, these people worked for dozens of hours on this sequence. He decided to cut it for the very reason that it stands out to me. He thought that it stood out too much to the audience. It's kind of like the moment in, like, I love this moment in RoboCop, but like when the Ed 209 turns into stop motion, it's so, which is great. Phil Tippett's work is great in that film, but it's very, very obviously stop motion. And I think he was running into the same problem here. He felt that it was going to take the audience out of the moment because they would immediately associate it with stop motion animation. Because it has that like stuttery kind of effect to it, you know? I mean, these days, like stop motion, if you watch the stuff coming out of Leica, it's a lot smoother, but back then it was always going to be a little bit stuttery. So obviously it was a heartbreaking moment for the effects crew who had put a lot of work into this sequence, but I do think that it works better for the final film in the way that we get it, which is that full-size Blair monster that we're going to talk about.
Well, it makes it tough because that I feel like that also stands out in RoboCop, because as good as everything else looks, like, just you don't need it, and then so why risk taking anybody out of it? So I'm kind of with that decision. Like, I don't know. Like, unless you mean to be abrasive about it, like in I Love Boosters or something.
Sure. Yeah. Where it's part of like the style. But obviously the alternative was the giant Blair monster that we talked about, where it took 40 guys to operate. And it's incredible. Like, it's an incredible piece of effects work from Rob Bottin. So the alternative was better anyway. But yes, it would have really taken the audience out, I think. But I always found it interesting, so I like looked into it because I'm like, why is there stop motion for like 4 seconds and nowhere else? It seems like really weird. Turns out there was a lot more, and I don't know if that footage exists anywhere. I don't think it's on the Blu-ray or anything, but I would be curious to see if it's floating out there somewhere. Moving on, though, you might think, as I assumed when I was doing my research on this, I was like, well, I guess the explosion of Outpost 31 was probably the last thing that they filmed for the movie, because once you blow up your entire set, like, what else are you supposed to do? You can't really use it anymore. Turns out I was wrong, because they actually repurposed the ruins of Outpost 31. You see, they had originally planned to build a separate set to represent the ruined Norwegian camp. They were going to build it about a quarter mile down the hill from Outpost 31. I mean, a quarter mile doesn't sound like far, but it would have required them to carve out a completely separate road. There wasn't a road to get to the location where they were going to film it. And at this point, Carpenter was sick of the cold. He was sick of the exhausting travel conditions, the 45 minutes up and down every day. It would have been another like hour or so to get to this new location. So he said, I'll be damned if I'm going to take a snowcat another 2 hours down the mountain just to shoot establishing shots at a second location for what is essentially a very small percentage of the film. So they figured out a workaround. And a couple days after they blew up the Outpost 31 set, they just went around and filmed the backside of the wreckage to serve as the ruins of the Norwegian camp. So not only did this save Carpenter from having to travel to a new location, but it saved the production like $250,000, $250,000, most of which was redirected to help fund Rob Bottin's now ballooning special effects budget.
For you true believers out there, apparently Outpost 31 is still there, sort of. The knoll where Lloyd built the base sits off Grand Duck Road. And if you go to outpost31.com, those guys all have like photos. There's a section there about Stewart, British Columbia, and you can see photos of people going out there and visiting the site of all of that and finding like pieces of helicopters and the wood all painted and that sort of stuff. So it's I think they were doing anniversary pilgrimages out there, but I don't know if they're still doing that. But they have a Facebook group too. They say if you're going there to like let somebody know, so maybe other people want to do it too or something. But it's kind of neat. There's still like a site there that you can visit.
Yeah, and, but you have to go up that road where there's going to be like ore trucks barreling at you.
Oh yeah. They 100% say like, and one of the guys has a picture of getting hyderized too. on there, but
nice.
They say, yeah,
that's
they say
a pilgrimage.
Yeah, right. They say you have to like plan it because there's like certain parts of the year that the road is like inaccessible, like you are not allowed to go on the road anymore.
Wow. Okay, so before we move away from British Columbia, from Stewart, I do want to mention one little fun fact that I found. Some of the footage that we see of the exteriors of Outpost 31, this installation that John Lloyd built, it was so highly detailed and so convincing that it was actually reused years later by the X-Files.
I was just watching a video about this. That's so weird.
I remember watching this episode of the X-Files. It's from season 1. It's called Ice. And it is like the plot of this episode is about an Arctic research team that drills deep into the ice and accidentally unearths a prehistoric blood-invading alien life form that drives the crew to absolute paranoid ruin as they realize we're not who we are. Does that sound a little familiar?
Sounds familiar. Sounds pretty fucking familiar.
So not only were they let's say they're homaging John Carpenter's The Thing, but they actually reuse the stock footage of the exterior base to establish the remote research station in that episode. They're reusing footage that John Carpenter shot in British Columbia. Some of it might have been in Juneau, Alaska too, actually. But yes, they reused that footage because it was so damn good.
I don't even think I realized they reused footage, but that's wild. There's a YouTube site I guess I should mention is Lost Legends TV, and the guy there he's fun, but he does like he usually does like 10 things I still can't explain about this movie. He did like the whole Halloween series, and they're a lot of fun. But like he does everything like within the story. So he's asking questions about why did this happen, and if we go back to going off on a tangent, here we go. But when we were going back to like, do you know you're the thing? Like that whole part of it. One of the things he brings up in the story is that I can't think of the fucking guy's name, but the one that during the blood test, the one that turns
Palmer.
Oh yeah, it's Palmer. We're just talking about Palmer anyway. So when Palmer turns, like he's also in the room when strapped to the table.
Norris. When
Norris's whole thing happens, when Copper gets his arms chopped off and all that stuff. So he was pointing out, he's just like, do you know you're the thing? Because he was there, and he's the one who points out the head crawling and says, you got to be fucking kidding me.
Yeah, one of my favorite lines from the movie.
He's like, but he had to be the thing at that time.
Did he?
Probably.
Maybe.
Because it's the blood test is like right after that.
True.
And it was like, was that the thing calling himself out, or like a different thing going like, what the fuck, bro?
Yeah, dude, what are you doing? or is it just a great performance
or just a great performance?
Yeah. Like he's trying to be convinced that he's like shocked by this.
Yeah, just trying to keep himself going.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I just thought I would bring that up. But he also in his 10 Things About the Thing video talks about that X-Files episode. And that was his thing. He was like, and then they do this, and that's pretty fucking familiar. And then they do this, and that's really fucking familiar. And then he finally like just throws his paper across. It's pretty fucking familiar.
Yeah, I remember. I mean, when I first saw that episode, because I was like a rabid X-Files fan when it was like airing. It was like my Sunday night tradition, then my Friday night tradition, then whenever they kept moving the fucking X-Files around the schedule, and that's why it went off the air. But I remember. I mean, I watched this episode then, but I had not seen The Thing yet. This was like, I was like, I don't know, 10 or something, or 11. I didn't see The Thing till I was a teenager. So I wouldn't have put that together. But when I rewatched The X-Files a few years ago, I got to this episode, and it's very early on. Like I said, it's season 1. It's pretty early on in the series. I remember watching it going, what the fuck? Like, they're literally just remaking The Thing. But the thing is, it's a good episode. It's a really good episode of The X-Files. But it is a blatant homage / ripoff of John Carpenter's The Thing. So I thought it was a little fun fact for you.
It's not the first and it won't be the last.
No. Once the location shoot wrapped, Carpenter went into the edit bay with his editor, Todd Ramsey, same guy who helped him edit Escape from New York, rather, with a goal of tightening things up so that they could keep the tension strong throughout the entire runtime of the film. And that meant that some stuff had to go. The first assembled cut made it pretty obvious that Lancaster's script, brilliant as it was on paper, was just a bit too talky in the middle section. Carpenter kind of felt that every time the characters talked, the tension started deflating, so he and Ramsey aggressively cut back on sections where they felt that the dialogue was slowing the momentum.
Yeah, and apparently he was the one, too, according to Carpenter, that even pushed it further than Carpenter was going initially. Like
Ramsey?
That Ramsey was. That, like, as they were, like, putting it together, Carpenter says he was beginning to worry that maybe this is too far with the bleakness. And he said that Ramsey was the one who kept saying, like, no, embrace the darkness. That's where the movie is, in the darkness.
How fucked up are you to tell John Carpenter to embrace the darkness? Like, to convince...
Right, exactly.
Well, they also chose to cut scenes that felt like too obvious or relied too much on standard Hollywood movie tropes. Because even though he had accidentally unleashed the slasher craze with Halloween, Carpenter, he kind of hated how his imitators threw every cliche onto the screen. You know, the body in the closet, the monster jumping out from behind the door, shit like that you see in every slasher movie. He didn't want anything in The Thing's final cut that felt expected or cheap.
Remember that scene I mentioned where Knowles pops the blow-up doll and yells, "Goddamn white women"?
Yeah.
That's where that went.
Yeah.
So I wonder if TK Carter was bummed or relieved that he didn't get that legacy.
Probably.
I mean,
I'm going to say relieved.
Yeah, I get the cut, but also every time I think about that scene existing, I laugh at it for some reason. So.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Anyway, speaking of him, while I think we kind of hit around this, but like while Carpenter, he was avoiding a lot of cliches, like his doll's death was just, it was like time and money. Like they just ran out of it. And so originally he was supposed to have like this horrific death scene where he finds Gary twitching on the ground. And then he was going to like, at the end, burst up through the floorboards was when you'd actually see what had happened to him. And he'd be like part of that assimilated mass of tentacles. And he was like supposed to be like begging, like, help me. While things were like coming out of his mouth or something. But at that point, like it was just too far gone. They couldn't like really get that done. So he just walks down a dark hallway and vanishes.
Never seen it again.
Yeah. I think there was a scene where McCready and Dr. Copper are like looking around the Norwegian camp, and there was like literally a mangled body that falls out of a cabinet as a jump scare. And so,
which he had done in The Fog too, when it was Tom Atkins and Jamie Lee Curtis are exploring the trawler that had been
that's
attacked,
right, yeah,
and a body falls out for no reason, and I think that was part of the reshoots to make The Fog scarier. And now he's saying, no, fuck that shit. We don't want any of that cliche shit.
Yeah, well, and then there's this whole no slasher cliche rule that it changed. Like originally, like Fuchs was murdered indoors. He was left pinned to a door with a shovel was how it was going, like in his chest. I guess like Michael Myers style.
Yeah, like when he stabs Bob to the wall.
Yeah, maybe the Thing would have done the head tilt. I don't know.
Yeah.
And similarly, Biddings was originally killed in the dog kennel when somebody stabs him in the back with an ice pick. So I think both of those were filmed, but Carpenter looked at the footage. He realized he felt they were like generic Halloween style slasher kills. And so he scraps them both and chose to reshoot them so that both characters are getting like a more atmospheric alien demise out in the snow.
Oh, both of their deaths are two of the best in the film. I mean, Bennings is the one that like sticks with me because he's got those like weird hands,
right?
And he lets out this like screaming noise when he gets found out that is so eerie. Like it's something that always sticks with me with this film. Plus, then I think they light him on fire, which is always cool.
Yeah. But he's definitely, I bet, the freakiest one. Like,
well, you see him getting assimilated too. Like in the scene, he's like in the corner and the like tentacles like going in his mouth. He's all slimy and shit. It's great. It's a great death. That's the way to go. If I have to go, that's how I want to go.
That's really it. Okay. All right. Tentacle porn for Justin is this exit.
That's it. So with a rough cut of the film in the works, it was time for Carpenter to start thinking about the movie's sound. Now, until now, as you know, Carpenter has scored every one of his films on his own, but now that he's got a much bigger budget, he felt like he needed an upgrade, and he wanted to hire a major Hollywood composer to do this one. Even so, handing the musical control over to someone else was kind of a tough pill to swallow, and he felt deeply conflicted about it. But that all changed when Stewart Cohen suggested Ennio Morricone. Morricone is, of course, the world-renowned Italian composer known for his sweeping spaghetti western scores with Sergio Leone. He's done a lot more than just that, certainly. Cinema Paradiso, things like that, things that are much more, I guess, classical in style. But for me, and for probably most people, when you hear the name of Ennio Morricone, you're thinking of The Good and the Bad and the Ugly. You're thinking of Ecstasy of Gold. Like, that's his legacy. But getting Morricone to work on this film was not easy. He actually turned these guys down twice. He didn't want to do it. I don't know why, but he had no interest in it at first. So to win him over, Cohen had he reached out to Bernardo Bertolucci, famous Italian director. I guess Cohen knew him somehow. I'm not sure how they were connected, but he writes about this in his blog. He reached out to Bertolucci, had Bertolucci put in a good word, and he even sent a translated copy of the script and a case of wine to Morricone to sweeten the deal. If you can't get an Italian with a case of red wine, then I don't know what you're doing.
Yeah,
that sounds racist. I'm sorry. or like stereotypical. I'm sorry, but you know, it worked.
You could have said spaghetti or something.
I could. Yeah, it could have been much worse.
He sent
him a crate of meatballs. But of gabagool. Sorry, I'm watching a lot of Sopranos right now. But this stuff might have helped get Morricone on board. But the real clincher was when Carpenter told Morricone that he had actually used the maestro's music in his wedding to Adrienne Barbeau. They had walked down the aisle to Ennio Morricone music. And Morricone was so touched by this that he finally agreed to take the job.
Oh.
Yeah, isn't that nice? Yeah.
Told you, John's a romantic.
I wonder what song it was. I feel like Ecstasy of Gold. If you don't know that song, go look it up. It's from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, I think. It's from one of that trilogy, but it is just an epic piece of music. I've seen a band. I can't remember who it was actually at this point, but it was years ago. Like, you know how bands will play like a walk-up song sometimes? You ever seen bands do that where they have a song played while they walk onto the stage and it's like somebody else's song? I've seen a band use Ecstasy of Gold before, and it's pretty badass. It's just a badass entrance song because it builds. It's really great. Anyway, I think it would make a good wedding song. So if you're planning on getting married and you want to use some Ennio Morricone music, that's my personal suggestion. You're welcome.
Thank you.
I wasn't talking to you directly. You're already married, unless you're planning on.
So I guess you're assuming I'm getting divorced.
I'm speaking to our listeners here. I'm addressing our listeners. So Carpenter and Cohen later flew out to Rome for a follow-up meeting to show Morricone footage from the film. And the cut they showed him was still missing most of the special effects because Rob Bottin is still working on them. But they wanted Morricone to kind of get an idea of what the mood of the movie was going to be like. But because there's like a language barrier, Carpenter, he's having a hard time conveying this, verbally. So he just sits down at a piano and started playing some music to kind of convey the dark, eerie feeling that he was after. Oh,
and my favorite part of this is apparently, like, right after the meeting, like, Carpenter had to rush out to catch a flight. And I guess Morricone had, he had played whatever, and so he was giving him some final instructions. And I guess whatever Carpenter had said, he looked at Morricone, and the only note was fewer notes.
Yeah.
and so, like, his principal direction to Morricone, a man with 500 scores, one of the greatest performers of all time, or movie music producers or whatever, fewer notes. So and it supposedly he also I don't think you said this, he played the Escape from New York score on repeat as a reference at one point in that meeting, apparently, too.
Carpenter did. He kept playing it for him. He's like, this is what this. So he's basically going like, I want you to do a John Carpenter score is what I would like you to do.
Right. Yeah. and Morricone, for the record, he has a flex because he delivers the one song that like just has like 2 notes in it that is just like it's like complying with the rules and still makes it genius somehow.
Yeah.
And the part that gives you chills about it is like it's like a heartbeat, kind of like this mechanical, inhuman heartbeat. And the title of that song is Humanity.
Ooh.
And I love that. I don't know. I just that it just solidifies everything, it feels like.
Yeah. Well, because they couldn't really spot the film conventionally. The movie's not locked yet. The edit's not locked yet. It's not completed yet when he starts working on it. So Morricone decided to compose an array of different tracks, hoping Carpenter would find something that he liked. And it kind of sounds like almost what Carpenter did on Halloween. Like he just made a bunch of music, then worked it into the film, as opposed to like scoring directly to the action on the film. So Morricone, he records a bunch of lush orchestral arrangements. He does that in Los Angeles. He travels to Los Angeles to do that. But before he flew over, while he was still over in Rome, he recorded several minimalist electronic synthesizer tracks. And when he arrived in LA, he opened up this tattered handbag. He pulled out a tape, and it contained a simple electric 2-note synth pulse. And that's, I think, the one you're talking about. Humanity.
Oh, yeah, that's the one I'm talking about.
Yeah.
I stepped on your note there.
No, it's fine. Because he had created that piece specifically to mimic Carpenter's own style. Like I kind of joked about it that he was he's just telling him to make a John Carpenter score, but he did sort of try to make a John Carpenter score. I mean, partially because we've got the lush orchestra stuff, which is very non-John Carpenter, but then he mixes up these synthesizer things, including this little 2-note synth track, and Carpenter loved it so much because, of course, it sounds like his music. He loved it so much that it became the theme of the movie. It's the music that you hear used over and over throughout the film. It is essentially the heartbeat of the movie. So even though Morricone recorded an incredible amount of music, the shifting edits at the very end of post-production left a few gaps in the film's soundtrack. But because Morricone was already done, Carpenter, he sort of secretly went into a studio for an afternoon session with his old composing partner, Alan Howarth, who we talked about on the Escape from New York episode. So this was completely uncredited. You don't see Alan Howarth's name in the credits of this film, but basically the two of them, Carpenter and Howarth, they recorded about 15 minutes or so of supplemental droney synth tracks to fill in the holes. And these are not like necessarily like songs. Carpenter even said in one interview, he's like, nowadays you'd probably just call them sound effects. They're just like this droning of sound that you kind of hear in the background of scenes, not like a composition necessarily. But what they recorded does include the electronic tone that plays under the opening credits. Like when we see the name The Thing appear on the screen, that's part of John Carpenter's contribution to the score. And that apparently did not thrill Morricone when he heard it, because he had no idea Carpenter was making this music, and then to have a piece of music that he didn't compose play over the opening credits, he was not very happy with.
Yeah, he actually confronted him. I think Carpenter finally like showed him how it was cut into the film, or maybe he played it for him first, because I remember seeing something that Morricone said. He told Carpenter, he was like, "Why did you call me if you want to do it on your own?" and then like he said that later Carpenter finally showed him how the music was cut into the movie, and then he said that he showed it to me and I just looked at him, and then he was very ashamed and he ran away from me.
I'm picturing him literally running away, like
right.
Like that Skeletor meme.
Right. Oh man! But this is so this is fucking weird too. By the way, Carpenter ends up ignoring a lot of the orchestral music that Morricone recorded, which did not go over well with Morricone. But however, 33 years later, Quentin Tarantino repurposes Morricone's unused music from The Thing for his old movie about a bunch of untrusting people trapped together in the freezing snow, The Hateful Eight.
Yeah.
Which, of course, also starred Kurt Russell.
And that's a fantastic score.
Well, if I may, since I've been on a tear against the Academy this episode for some reason, in 1982, this score, the one we now call iconic, meaning for The Thing, was nominated for a Razzie for Worst Musical Score.
What the hell?
Ennio Morricone's name on the ballot. Now run the tape forward. In 2016, Tarantino scores The Hateful Eight using new Morricone material plus the 3 unused cues from these very thing sessions. Tracks titled Eternity, Bestiality, and Despair. And that score wins Morricone his first Academy Award.
Wow.
At 87 years old.
Damn.
Making him the oldest winner in Oscar history at the time, I think.
Wow.
That's fucking nuts.
That is crazy.
So you think about that. Like, so the industry gives him a worst score nomination in 82, and 33 years later, the same sessions are inside an Oscar-winning score. So add that to the crimes of the Academy file that we're making here, because The Thing never got a single nomination, but it's weird. It's like, I was trying to think of an angle while I was like looking at this, and I'm like, so Morricone studies Carpenter style, produces a perfect imitation, so perfect that Carpenter adopts it and redoes it sort of as the theme of the movie. Meanwhile, Carpenter, everyone assumes that's Morricone, but then tries to give him a Razzie, but then 40 years later, they can't tell that this is the same music from that, and then they attribute it an Oscar. I was trying to think of an angle of like, this feels like The Thing with music, like they're all like copying each other.
Yeah. I see where you're going.
There. Yeah, I didn't quite get there, but
I could see the where you were trying to go.
Yeah, thank you. Well, at least somebody else could.
Speaking of, we talked about the opening credits. Did you read anything about how they created that, like the scene where the words "The Thing" like get revealed on screen?
It's like literal flame, right?
Well, so it was created by this guy named Peter Curran. He had who was hired for it. Actually, James Cameron bid on it. This is like very early in James Cameron's career. You know, he was still working for Roger Corman at New World. We talked about him during our Escape from New York episode because he helped out on that. But James Cameron bid on it, and he was outbid by this Peter Curran guy. So they didn't have a lot of money for this. They had to do it kind of on a budget. And Curran used a fish tank, a garbage bag, and yes, just some matches. So he had this like 4-foot wide fish tank. He fills it up with smoke completely, fills the fish tank with smoke, seals it off. On the back of the fish tank, he placed the title, The Thing, like we see in the film, like the logo. It's drawn with black animation ink on a clear cell. Behind that, he set up a wooden frame and stretched a garbage bag over a piece of canvas on it. Behind the garbage bag, he puts this like 1,000-watt light bulb pointed directly at the title cell, which is being blocked by the black garbage bag, right? And then when he rolled camera, he turns on the camera, rolls film, he runs behind the setup, and he just set the garbage bag on fire. So as the matches caught, they burned a hole that rapidly melted and peeled the plastic bag back, and that allowed this like 1,000-watt light bulb to burst through the opening and stream directly through the letters of the title cell, which is how we get the not only the title, but the rays of light coming through it. That's not like animation. That is a practical effect. And it's because he's using like smoke in the fish tank, so it allows the light to shine through. He did it it took him like 15 tries to get it right. It's an iconic. It's iconic. And the fact that he created it, you would assume it's animation, but no, completely practical.
Yeah, that blows my mind.
Yeah.
I remember reading about that when I was researching this, and it's just crazy that that's like an actual like live thing happening.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. So anyway, another tangent, Gary.
Well, there's like a million of them here.
Yeah, but I mean, we mentioned Morricone's music, or rather John Carpenter's music playing over the opening credits, so I figured, why not talk about the opening credits? In fact, another fun fact for you, Gary, that's not in my notes at all. That's just because I've been reading so much about this movie. in the opening credits, John Carpenter wanted the movie to just start with the title The Thing. He didn't want any of the like actors' credits at the beginning of the movie. He wanted a kind of a cold open and just say John Carpenter's The Thing, and then we just start, and then the credits for the actors would be at the end of the movie. Well, the official title for this movie is John Carpenter's The Thing. So, by Directors Guild rules, if his name is officially part of the title, then that means that his directing credit also has to be during the opening of the film. Directed by John Carpenter has to be part of the opening credit sequence. And due to those same guild rules, if his credit appears there, the Screen Actors Guild requires that the actors have their credits there as well. So if he wanted this movie to be called John Carpenter's The Thing, which he did, then he had to agree to have the actors' names at the beginning of the movie as well.
Interesting. It's amazing it wasn't Wilbur Stark's The Thing.
I'm sure Wilbur would have loved that.
I think that's why he sued him. Do you know, since while we're off on this tangent, I was reading an interview with him the other day too, where he was telling the guy was asking about John Carpenter's blah, 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 you know? Mm-hmm. And he was like, that's branding. It came from, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, or like that comes from like Howard Hawks. And he's like, oh yeah. He's like Howard Hawks, John Ford. He's like, it's just like a bunch. He's like,
Alfred Hitchcock. Yeah.
Hitchcock. Yeah. He was like, all those guys did it. He was like, so he's like, I always kind of wanted to do that. He's like, the one that always bothered me, and this is the part I didn't know. He was like, is like when it says a film by. It was like, really? He's like, you don't like that? And he's like, no, it was fucking pretentious. It's bullshit. He's like, what are you gonna put a film by? He's like, all I did was direct it. It's not a film by you. It's a film by a lot of people. That's so fucking stupid.
I wonder what he thinks of a Spike Lee joint. Let's ask him his opinion on that. Right. Or maybe we shouldn't.
Yeah, probably not.
Maybe we shouldn't. Well, by the time that Morricone was finishing up the score for The Thing, Carpenter and Ramsey had assembled what they believed was a nearly final cut of the film. They thought that they had it. This is it. This is what we're going to release in theaters. Morricone's incredible scores coming in. We've got the edit. We're going to release this in theaters. This is exactly what people want to see. Well, Gary, let me tell you, they assumed incorrectly. They were dead wrong. And next time here on Cinema Shock, we will find out just how wrong they were and how one of the greatest horror movies ever made nearly got buried forever. This story is not over. I know we're 3 parts in, but there's a lot more going on that is going to happen to be able to get the movie that we all know and love to the screen. A lot of battles still to be fought by John Carpenter and his crew.
Ooh, this is a marathon, baby, through The Thing.
Yep. It's a great story. It's one of my favorite behind the scenes stories on a movie. I love it because I love where it I love where it ends. I don't love where it ends in 1982, but I love where it ends today. You know, like this movie is beloved, but it was quite the winding road to get there.
Well, you mentioned in a previous episode that there should be a movie made about The Thing or the making of The Thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, hearing like the stories about the road alone.
Yeah. You know, or them hanging off the side of a cliff or Kurt Russell almost blowing up. Or like there are what's his name? Larry Franco almost blowing up. Like there are a lot of people almost getting blown up and falling off cliffs in this story.
Right.
It is a harrowing adventure, but it's a great story and it's fantastic. And there are so many great resources that we've looked at regarding the making of this, and we're gonna cite all of our sources at the very end of this whole story because there are too many to just throw in now. But some fantastic stuff, and I'm having a lot of fun telling this story.
Same. This is a blast. I can't wait till next week where we get into even more shit that goes sideways.
Yep, it sure does. But I think that's it for this episode, Gary. As always, thank you to our folks over at Cinema Shock Plus. If you want to join Cinema Shock Plus and show some appreciation for all the work that we put into these episodes and throw a few bones our way, which does not go, I will tell you right now, does not go into mine and Gary's pockets. It fully goes into research materials and hosting the show on podcast platforms and things like that. That all costs money. So we're not making any money off of it. It's just keeping it's keeping us from going in the red. Personally is really what it's doing. So thank you to everyone who contributes to that. And we like to give back by providing all kinds of bonus content. We do extended versions of these episodes where we have bonus features. We do video versions of these episodes for the highest tier. You get voting rights for our new releases every single month. You get merchandise discounts that you can only get by being a Cinema Shock Plus member. And you get all of our Twin Peaks stuff that's only on that feed. And we're working on, we've got so many other ideas for things that we want to put in the members only feed. So we are just adding value all the time.
Yeah. And even you got Justin's nudes over there too. So
yeah, that's the $15 tier.
Yeah. You want to talk about,
that's not much.
The real thing.
When he says nudes, he means, I'm learning to make pasta and I'm posting those videos on Cinema Shock Plus. CinemaShock.net/plus if you want to see those nudes.
Yeah. It's going to be, he's hoping to get his brand out in a supermarket. Justin's nudes.
Justin's wet and sloppy nudes.
This what a way to end an episode.
Yep. We're really selling this. Well, other than the nudes, where can people, or maybe, I don't know, where can people find you on the internet, Gary?
I am at This Is Gary Horde. So far, that's it.
And I am at Justin_Bishop. The show is at Cinema_Shock. Hit us up. Send us a message on social media. We like to respond. I think we're pretty good at responding anywhere that we get message. It might take us a couple days to see it because we're on like 15 different platforms or something. I don't know. We're on all of them at this point, except for Truth Social.
Yeah,
but maybe one day. We'll see.
Yeah, if you guys really push for it.
I guess that's it. Until next time.
May the wings of liberty never lose a feather.
And be excellent to each other.